The Beatles will always be most closely linked with Brian Epstein. However, his management company, NEMS Enterprises Ltd, also cared for several other artists. Along with Tommy Quickly and Sounds Incorporated, Epstein also had success managing Gerry and the Pacemakers, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, who had 4 hits with Lennon-McCartney songs, the Fourmost, for whom Lennon wrote the first 2 singles, the Cyrkle, Epstein's first American group, and Cilla Black, Epstein's only female artist, later known as Sounds Incorporated. Therefore, in today's video, we'll talk about the other musicians Brian Epstein collaborated with and how his work influenced their success. But before, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this. Epstein has his unfulfilled artistic aspirations. His father, who owned many furniture companies in Liverpool, had vehemently dissuaded him from pursuing a career as a garment designer when he was a youngster. Epstein started acting after that and enrolled in classes at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London, but he finally left and returned to Liverpool. Epstein gradually became aware of Liverpool's expanding beat music scene and started appealing. In July 1961, Bill Harry, a former Liverpool College of Art student, began producing a music publication called Mersey Beat. Epstein carried the publication in his store from the first issue and eventually contributed his record review column. 3 months after the release of Mersey Beat, Beatles enthusiast Raymond Jones, previously interviewed by Goldmine, visited NEMS in search of the song My Bonnie, on which Tony Sheridan was backed by the Beatles, billed as the Beat Brothers. Epstein decided to go to the Cavern Club on November 9th when the Beatles were performing a midday session after observing how quickly the albums were selling. He promptly took over as the group's manager and, by June 1962, had gotten them a record deal with EMI subsidiary Parlophone, Gerry and the Pacemakers. Epstein then started looking for other groups with which to collaborate after becoming convinced that Liverpool had more extraordinary talent. He went to the band Gerry and the Pacemakers, which Gerry Marsden fronted. The group and the Beatles shared the same club circuit and were friendly rivals. Marsden was overjoyed when Epstein told him he wanted to be his band's manager. "I thought, if Brian can get us a few more cash and maybe a record deal, well, that would be the big time for us." Marsden later remembered, "He just told me he'd got a record deal for the Beatles." Epstein dressed the Pacemakers in matching outfits and improved their stage presence by giving them the same buff and shine he had given the Beatles. The Pacemakers received How Do You Do It after the Beatles decided against using it as their second single. When it was released in 1963, it immediately became the group's first #1. It was followed by the Beatles' From Me to You and the Pacemakers' I Like It. For a total of 14 weeks in a row, the Epstein-managed artist held the top spot. The Mersey Beat boom was already in motion. You'll Never Walk Alone, another #1 hit for the Pacemakers in 1963. The upbeat tune from the show Carousel was adopted as the Liverpool Football Club's anthem. The Dakotas and Billy J. Kramer. By that time, Epstein had expanded his roster of performers. After seeing Billy Kramer and the Coasters open for the Beatles, a different Liverpudlian band, Epstein offered to manage them. Kramer became fascinated right away. It was a significant deal for Kramer to be contacted by someone who was the Beatles' manager. Kramer's band, however, had no interest in pursuing a career as a musician, so Epstein teamed him up with the Dakotas from Manchester and gave them the middle initial, J, which was chosen because it was the first letter in Julian Lennon's name. Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas' Do You Want to Know a Secret reached #1 on the UK charts by May 1963. Do You Want to Know a Secret reached #2 and was the first of 3 John Lennon and Paul McCartney compositions to help Kramer and the Dakotas climb the UK Top 20 charts. The group's second record, Bad to Me, reached #1 on other charts before peaking at #3 in the UK Top 20 in September 1963. The group's third single, I'll Keep You Satisfied, reached #11 in November 1963. Epstein had dressed Kramer in a fine suit and encouraged him to gravitate towards pop music rather than the rock that Kramer liked. Epstein persevered in giving every one of his acts this image makeover, a formulaic strategy that occasionally obscured a performer's genuine talents in favor of replicating what Epstein perceived as a winning formula. The Big Three. Thanks to drummer Johnny Hutchinson and the massive amps, dubbed coffins, they made for themselves, the Big Three had a reputation as one of the most aggressive, loud, and influential bands on the Liverpool circuit. This tough bunch was initially happy to join with Epstein, but they weren't so keen on the typical Epstein makeover. After a little more than a year, they split up after their demo of Some Other Guy, which they had recorded for their Decca audition, was released without their consent. Despite the Big Three's failure as a unit, Epstein was very impressed with Johnny Hutchinson's drumming coming and requested him to take the place of Pete Best in the Beatles before Ringo Starr was given the opportunity. Hutchinson declined him, saying to Epstein, "I wouldn't join the Beatles for a gold clock," despite his hatred of the competing band. After the Big Three split up in 1966, Hutchinson left the music industry and hasn't spoken about it or the Beatles since. Cilla Black. The Beatles' big break in America came the following year. Cilla Black, another Epstein act, made her debut in that same year. Black was a secretary at the Cavern who loved music and occasionally sang on stage with the bands. She tried out for Epstein on John Lennon's advice but was unsuccessful. Epstein immediately signed her after seeing her sing Bye Bye Blackbird at a bar 9 months later. The Lennon-McCartney song Love of the Loved, which was published in 1963, was her debut record and peaked at number 35. She later had chart-topping success in 1964 with Anyone Who Had a Heart and You're My World. Her producer, George Martin, told Ray Coleman, "Brian had the sense to perceive in Cilla something that I originally hadn't seen. I mistakenly believed she was a dolly rocker from Liverpool who was beautiful and unique, but in no way a ballad singer. He made me realize how dramatic Cilla could be. He had a remarkable vision for the artists he worked with." The Cyrkle. The Cyrkle is remarkable even though they weren't a member of the British invasion, since they were the only American band to sign a deal with NEMS and the last band Epstein signed before his passing. The band's new name, the Shondells, was suggested by John Lennon, and they started working with Epstein as the Beatles' opening act for their 1965 and 1966 American tours. Red Rubber Ball and Turn Down Day were their two most successful singles. However, they split up soon following after Brian's passing. Tom Dawes and Don Dannerman, the band's two frontmen, both started writing jingles after the band disbanded. Dawes is perhaps most known for creating the well-known Plop Plop Fizz Fizz jingle for Alka-Seltzer. The Fourmost. The two J's were founded in 1957 by guitarist, vocalist Joey Bauer and best buddy, guitarist, vocalist Brian O'Hara, when drummer Brian Redman, born June 21, 1941, Highton, Liverpool, Lancaster, and bass guitarist, singer Billy Hatton joined the group in September 1959. The group's name was altered to the Four J's. On March 1, 1961, the Four J's performed at the Cavern Club. In November 1961, rhythm guitarist, singer Mike Millward, formerly of The Undertakers, joined the Four J's, and in September 1962, drummer-singer Dave Lovelady did likewise. In October 1962, the group changed its name to The Fourmost. The band and Brian Epstein agreed to a management agreement on June 30, 1963. This resulted in George Martin scheduling an audition for them and signing them to EMI's Parlophone record label. The Fourmost had access to early Lennon-McCartney songs since Epstein served as their manager. John Lennon wrote the first two singles for The Fourmost. One of John Lennon's early songs, Hello Little Girl, was released on August 30th, 1963, and it peaked at number 9 in the UK. I'm in Love, Lennon-McCartney, their follow-up song, was released on November 15th and peaked at number 17 in the UK. It was remarkable for being one of the first Beatles compositions to be released in the US, but like the Fourmost other singles, it didn't do well on the US charts. Tommy Quickly. Epstein worked very hard to make Tommy Quickly, previously Tommy Quigley, a success, starting him off with a typical Lennon-McCartney song, Tip of My Tongue, but Wild Side of Life ended up being his only hit. Another Liverpool band, the Remo 4, supported Quickly even though they themselves had no chart success. However, the quartet went on to support Billy J. Kramer and then George Harrison on their respective soundtracks for the movies Wonderwall and Wonderwall 2. The Moody Blues. The Moody Blues could be regarded as the best-kept secret in music. The Moody Blues had immense success in the late 1960s and early 1970s with iconic albums like Days of Future Past and Every Good Boy Deserves Favor, but the majority of acts that were dropped by NEMS or departed on their own did not go on to do better things. However, the Moody Blues only had a few modest singles while the band was signed to NEMS. The bands and performers that Brian Epstein managed are listed below. There are many more, but these were the key ones following the Beatles. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please remember to like it and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you in the next one.